Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming back for the second interview in this series that I'm doing of just kind of a perspective on ADHD from childhood through young adulthood and how things are going. And so this second interview, I'm going to let the young woman introduce herself to you, but her name is Summer Brown, and she has recently become part of my life. If you watch the previous video, she's my son Lucas's girlfriend. And so but she's also been diagnosed and has been dealing with ADHD for quite a while. So I find her story very interesting, and I hope you do too. So go ahead, Summer, you can introduce yourself.
I'm Summer. I'm 19 years old. I go to LSU. I'm a psychology major for a bunch of other reasons. And I work at Canes, which is where I met Lucas.
Okay, very good. And you've been at LSU for a year now?
When the semester ends, it'll be like a year and a half, but yeah.
And you kind of started mid-pandemic, didn't you?
Yes, I started when I started school, the pandemic was very new, actually. It was kind of just it was an interesting time to start school, let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. And probably did not meet any expectations you had as a kid growing up, right?
No, not at all.
Okay, now, do you remember about how old you were when you were diagnosed with ADHD?
I would assume it was around the time I would I would assume I was around the age of 4 whenever I was
That young.
diagnosed. I was very young, but I think it was definitely a time whenever they were also diagnosing me with other things, just because I'd gone through some family issues. So whenever I was moved, they had me in therapy, and they were just trying to figure out if there was anything that they could do to help me assimilate into my new life a little bit better.
Okay, gotcha. Now, was it something, did they try to keep these different diagnoses away from you, or was it something you were kind of aware of because you were so young from the beginning? Because I have some clients who actually prefer to try to keep the diagnosis away from their kids, because in their head they're afraid that their kid is going to think less of themselves for having an ADHD label. So they don't like to tell their children at all. And so I'm just kind of getting that feel for your experience.
I would say that it wasn't something that my family tried to keep away from me. In fact, my little brother was diagnosed with ADHD as well around the same time as me. So, it was known that it was something that did affect me and him. They didn't necessarily try to keep it away from me, but they definitely tried to keep, like, I would say that the idea of me having ADHD wasn't as it wasn't something that we necessarily acknowledged or tried to like move forward with and try to adjust to.
Yeah, it wasn't the major thing going on in your life because you had a bunch of other things going on in your life at the time.
Yes.
Okay. So you don't like, just probably a stupid question, but you probably don't remember like any particular behavioral issues you had or anything related to ADHD, not the other stuff is.
I could definitely link a lot of the things to be related to ADHD. I think that a lot of the issue was everybody around me wasn't aware that that was the thing showing. Just the outbursts of things whenever people would I remember being in school, and like anytime anybody would have some sort of I would have conflict, just the avoidance of conflict. If there were some sort of confrontational thing, anybody confronting me about anything would make me rush to like extreme behaviors. And I think that that was the ADHD just kind of portraying itself as being unable to like regulate those emotions and just being impulsive with my emotions and things. So like throwing desks and yelling, screaming, having tantrums because I was unable to express myself. I think
the meltdowns were part of your experience. See, Lucas didn't have the meltdowns. I've got that with Liam, and like some people call it out, but to me it was beyond outburst. Like it was a total meltdown. Like the logical part of his brain would totally shut down, and he was nothing but a stream of emotion.
And that's exactly how it was with me, especially in school. Like anybody trying to calm me down would just make it worse. Like it was just constant. It was like this rage. It would just overwhelm.
I guess that kind of leads into the other question about negative comments. Like, I do find in like a statistics, they say 20,000 before the age of 12. Honestly, my experience just with the 3 kids has been, it's so much more that the adults and kids in their lives feel this freedom to be more negative, to more criticizing of kids with ADHD than ones who aren't, because like, you know, what's wrong with you? What's this kind of stuff. Did you find a lot of that growing up from adults and other kids? Like, what's wrong
Yes.
with you?
In school specifically, I had a lot of issues with other kids being, I guess, afraid of me because of the outbursts, but also like being mean to me on purpose to get a reaction or a rise out of me. And then
Oh,
they'd
wow.
call me names and they'd say things to me and they'd try to just make me angry. From my parents, we had like my room was always a mess. My grandmother would always tell me how I'm just dirty and I'm messy and she just doesn't understand why I can't keep anything together. And then losing things constantly, it was like, well, you just had the homework this morning, why isn't it here now? And it was a lot of issues with just feeling responsible for everything and not knowing why I couldn't just do it like everybody else could just do it.
Okay, that makes sense. So you did have a lot of that like pressure from home to fit in, to be good, to just comply, to just why can't you
Yeah.
just be good? Why can't you just, because I even remember, I'm going to talk with you, like with Luke, is like losing stuff. We would do homework at night and I would hand it to him, he'd put it in his folder, put it in his backpack, and somewhere between 7:15 leaving my house and 8 o'clock in the morning when school started, like the piece of paper was just gone. And he would do it, but he would like, and so it sounds like you experienced a lot of that stuff too.
Yeah, a lot of that issue. And I think it had a lot to do with the disorganization. Like if you looked in my book bag, there'd be a million loose papers. And my homework assignment was probably one of those loose papers every time. But even looking through it, I couldn't seem to find anything.
Outside of like grades and school behavior, did you feel like did you struggle with any other areas, like socially, with boys, with extracurricular activities, just kind of outside of the let's get good grades and go to school?
I think I struggled a lot with friends. Every time that I was out with friends or I'd be with my friends, there was always that sense, like that negative sense of like, oh, I'm just like a little bit different. I'd say something awkward, and I would say awkward things because I'd be trying to fit in and I'd just wind up not saying the right thing and I'd get some sort of odd reaction and it would make me feel really insecure about it. And it would make me like not want to go back out with people and see that, just avoid those social interactions because I'd be afraid that those things would happen again or that they'd continue to have those kind of like thoughts about me in future.
I understand it. It's more of not so much feeling less than, but feeling too much. I even struggle that,
Yeah.
like, I'm 40, I don't know if it's 45 or 46. I'm 40 something years old, and I still struggle with not struggle now, I guess, so much because I recognize what it is, but for most of my life, I didn't feel very comfortable having female friends. I didn't know how to have friendships. Like I could hang out with guys, I could have boyfriends, but female friends were something that I always felt extremely uncomfortable around. And it was almost like, because I couldn't, like you said, I would say the weird thing, or like we'd be having a conversation about, I don't know, rugs. And next thing you know, I'm talking about like the East India Trading Company or something, because in my head, like I made this connection and I didn't voice the connection out loud. I would just jump in with this random thought. And I was like, oh my God, who is she? And so like, I kind of developed this phobia of having female friendships growing up. And I don't know if it was the same with you, with just women or just friendships in general.
A lot of it would be I guess with female friends, a lot of my issue was is I didn't have like, I guess like you said, like I would jump from thing to thing and it always did throw them off. I lost my thought.
It's okay. That's what you're made to do. So it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if it was just a female friend thing though, or if it was both. I think that sometimes um we get the idea, or I would get the idea of like the judgment more from females because they were just more expressive. Like girls who I was friends with, they were just more expressive about how they felt, and if I did say something wrong, they would acknowledge it rather than. So I definitely could relate to that.
Now, are you okay now, or were you always okay with kind of how your nervous system worked, or is it something that you felt was wrong with you from a very young age? Again, I
I mean, I
understand you have a
always
very layered past, so I don't want to go into the other stuff. I'm talking specifically about ADHD.
with ADHD specifically, I've definitely noticed like I kind of have always known that it was there, and it's kind of something you have to start like where I noticed in myself was I would start masking those behaviors and trying to like fix them before they became an issue. So with my time issues, my time blindness, I do check the time a lot, and I do set a lot of alarms, and I do try to make sure I can get places and do things to avoid forgetting things. I make like notes that I probably will never see actually, but the whole idea was like preventative. So I was aware of it, and I was trying to do my own preventative like just things, and I don't know I don't know if I'm necessarily okay with how it works, like how my nervous system works, but I think that I'm growing to like accept it and just trying to work with it rather than like like work against it. And I think I have a lot of my own internalized working against it that was like put onto me by my parents and people around me, just saying that you should be able to do this and you should be able to do that, and the should that you said.
Yeah,
um
shitting all over
and
yourself.
yeah, I think that I myself have that issue for myself. So a lot of the things that I do and a lot of the ways that I prepare for it are just not reasonable or ways that I can actually do it. And I frustrate myself in that way because I never meet those expectations. So there's that.
So hypercritical over yourself. That's actually one of the they have like these different, like ADHD has typical symptoms that other people can see, right? Like the impulsive behavior, talking too much, fidgeting too much, having to move around, emotional control. But there's so many other deeper things that go on. The hypercriticism of yourself and others, and then overly sensitive to criticism of yourself. Like someone might tell an example, like you're supposed to be in line, right? Hey, move a step over. In them, it's a very neutral statement, right? Like move one step over to the left,
Yeah.
or whatever, right? Whatever you happen to be. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I was out of place and I messed up the whole line. Like, I don't know, do you feel any of that like hyper self-criticism, or is that just me?
No, I definitely do. Maybe not for things as little as like being like in the wrong spot, but in situations where like I feel like I did a good job or I did very well, like if it was on an assignment or if it were some task at work or if it was something that I felt like I had done really well with and somebody had even a small amount of constructive criticism even, I would feel that my own idea of what is good and my own idea of what my worth is and how well I do things is just lower than everybody else's, and that I'm not meeting the expectations that are way up here. And it's I think that as far as criticism from other people, it makes me feel like I'm not criticizing myself hard enough, which I think causes me to just keep expecting more and more. That just isn't possible.
I understand that, and be wary. My experience with that is I'm way more critical of myself than anyone could ever pretend to be. But at times I've fallen into like a feeling of almost paralysis because of it. I don't know if you've ever like where my expectations are so up here, other people's expectations are down here, but I'm like, yeah, but I can do better. I can do more. I can do whatever. But then there's almost like this leap sometimes stops me from taking action.
Yes, and that I have a lot of issue with. Like I have these high expectations for myself and I'm like I can do it, and then I'm like I'm going to do it, and that motivation all just drains out of me and I just want to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And I think that is this type of avoidance because if you avoid it, and I see this in myself, I'll avoid something and do it last second, almost as a way to prove that even like that no matter what I get, I wasn't at my best anyway. Like I did this in 2 hours, and no, it's not the greatest and it's not perfect and it's not at everybody else's expectations, but could you have done this amount of work in 2 hours is more like my brain.
Yeah. I get
Um,
it.
it's just like expecting that it's almost like you're tricking yourself. Like if because I probably could do it if I started something early and like worked on it and didn't overwhelm myself. I probably could do it really well. And I think it's almost challenging myself to, or setting myself up for a trap of doing it, not necessarily doing horrible and saying, well, if I would add more time, I would have done even better. Like it kind of just allows me to not know.
Yeah, I understand. And there's a part of me sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it's like, okay, well, if I do this thing and I do it my best, then what? So there's almost like a fear of doing too well. I don't know. Anyway, it's strange. Okay, we can go on to the next question. Now I know your circumstance is a little different than Lucas. Like you've the medication was something you were comfortable with, and like you've changed and done that. You've been in counseling and therapy before, correct? So I guess what I'm saying is you've had a therapeutic outside influence that I fault myself for not including Lucas in when he was younger. That's something that you've had that he hasn't had, right? And so I'm interested in that, and I enjoy that. So these co-diagnoses we talk about, and I'm talking about like anxiety, depression, things like that. Was that something that came after your ADHD diagnosis? Or first of all, do you have any? And then second, was it something that came after your ADHD diagnosis? Was it related to your ADHD, or was it related just to your more layered background, I guess?
I think it's related to both the ADHD and the layered background. I have both anxiety and depression. I with ADHD and with being diagnosed with ADHD, anxiety, and depression all around the same time, I don't think my psychiatrist really linked them together. I'm sure he did, but he was more interested in treating the anxiety and the depression because those were the things that seemed to be influencing me the most, like having anxiety about things, just the way that I would have panic attacks and like break down and not be able to like continue doing anything. They wanted to get a hold of that because I think a lot of the thing with ADHD is that they just assumed I'm assuming it's also because there wasn't a lot of information on it when I was 4,
Yeah.
or as much with the way
your
that they all
perspective is
work together.
Yeah.
But they treated my anxiety more than anything else. I think that my grandmother didn't want to put me in the same thing as my brother. My brother had ADHD. They gave him ADHD medicine and she didn't really like it for him. And I think she thought maybe helping me with my anxiety would help me more than going the ADHD medication route. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, now, just to clarify for anybody watching, are you currently on ADHD medication, or you're just on the anxiety, depression stuff? Like I don't care.
Well, I stopped
I
taking
don't care. I just
anxiety
want to
and
make sure I'm not
depression
lying to
medicine.
anybody.
No, I stopped taking anxiety and depression medicine when I was in high school, and then I was unmedicated until more recently. And I started taking Vyvanse, which is an ADHD medicine. And this is the first time that I've actually been prescribed ADHD medicine because throughout most of my childhood, they were trying to treat my anxiety. And anxiety and ADHD medicine don't typically mix well together. So, yes, more recently I have been taking ADHD medicine.
Okay. Now, it's interesting conversation I have, especially with some of my co-coaches who specifically deal with trauma. But we go into the difference between like big T and little t trauma, right? And I love how I love the distinction in terms of honoring other people's experiences. But true trauma is not necessarily the action, right? It's how your nervous system responds to a particular action. So I know Liam had some traumatic experiences in school, and we didn't help it at home. Lucas, I'm sure, did too. He's not real keen on talking about emotions, but I would imagine he has too, right? And so I know you've had some like big giant T stuff, but are there things that you can remember? And again, I want to talk strictly about the ADHD stuff, like in school, the way teachers or other adults in your life responded to you that kind of triggered a traumatic response in terms of criticism, maybe, or words used. I know for me, what I would get all the time, Haley, you talk well, but you talk too much, or like you need to be quiet, or you need to, your sister feels bad when you do well, or like, you know, that kind of thing. And so I didn't know if that was something you had as a experience or not so much, or.
I think that because my ADHD wasn't as bad as my little brother's, as in like the hyperactivity and like the outward pushing, like talk. I did talk a lot, but I wasn't constantly moving, and I wasn't constantly like breaking things and like causing things to just happen all the time. I think a lot of it was I had there were higher expectations. So I wish that my grandmother would have taken more time to like come back to me and try to work with my ADHD rather than kind of pushing it off to the side because there were other more prominent ADHD factors that my little brother was showing. And as far as teachers go, I wish that my teachers would have sort of seen it and accommodated to it in more of a like realizing that me forgetting my homework every day wasn't like me not caring, because whenever I do well in the tests and I do well in the study guides and I do well like during class, even if I was a little bit chattier, I just like, I wish there was more noticing of those symptoms, because everybody knew that I had it, but nobody actually acknowledged it.
I got
Like
you.
everybody knew I had ADHD, but there was no acknowledgement of like, these are things that we could do to fix or to help or to do better. It was more of just, oh well, just kind of thrown in there.
I know with women a lot and girls too. I can give some examples. In fact, I have a friend who's in her mid 60s or so, and just realizing now that she had ADHD as a child. With girls and women a lot, they tend, until recently, were kind of underdiagnosed because the H part is what they always, it was more considered internalized. So you had racing thoughts and you had racing feelings and you had all this kind of stuff. And those racing thoughts combined with your tendency to be distracted to begin with kind of made you the daydreamer, kind of the out there person. I did have the physical hyperactivity and I was very verbal and vocal. At the same time, I was not Looney Tunes, but that was words that was used to describe me, right? I was kind of out there and goofy, but I didn't necessarily have the same degree or kind of physical need that like I see in my kids. So I don't know if that was something that, yeah, I'm going conjecture her opinion, but maybe that was why they kind of didn't pay attention to your ADHD, because girls aren't like boys. Girls aren't going to break things and punch walls. Instead, we're just going to scream and have like meltdowns. No.
Well, see, I did break things and throw things, but it was once it got to a certain point. Like it was never like my first, like it was kind of my first reaction, but it was never like that when I was more out and like throwing things and like ready. But as I got older in school, I started to realize I couldn't do that, and instead I would just like cry.
Okay, gotcha. Now, if you could
It was
go
more
back
of like
to
a breakdown cry.
your second grade teacher or your grandmother when you were 7, 8, 9 years old, right? What's something you would like to tell them that would have helped you at that age? Is that question clear enough, or do I need to phrase it differently?
That's good. I would probably tell them to pay more attention to like the little things, like the forgetfulness, maybe set up more like the structure of things to be a little bit different, instead of just expecting it to always get done, just having those expectations that I can just do it as a normal person, like just I say normal, but as
I
a
know what you mean.
neurotypical person, just like being able to just do it, just understanding that things take time and not expecting things to be done immediately, and like understanding that that those types of things can be overstimulating. Knowing that my room is really, really messy is just, and looking at it gives me anxiety. Just knowing that taking things little by little rather than trying to give me big chunks of everything all at once.
Yes, they don't say
I
clean
think that
your room,
if
say,
my
hey,
teachers,
bring me your laundry or make your bed or throw away your garbage, like break it down into steps, as opposed to say
yes,
clean
rather
your
than
whole
just
room.
throwing it, yeah, just clean the whole thing. It's like that's just too much. So
Gotcha.
just breaking things down would have been a lot better for both my teachers and my parents, I think, and telling them that would have been helpful.
Well, I know Lucas's hyper focus things that he's had at one point. Like, I know it's not right, but it really seems like one day he went to bed and like was practicing drawing stickmen, and the next day he woke up and he's like this beautiful artist, right? Because he was hyper focusing on drawing at the time, and I didn't realize it because he was up all night and up in his little attic room and we didn't know what was going on. What are some of the things you've hyper focused on that maybe you're interested in now or not interested in anymore? Like, I'm just curious. I wrote an entire term paper on the Phoenicians because of Jezebel in the Bible. So I'd like to hear someone else's kind of take on that.
So one of my things is whenever I hyper focus on something, if I really truly hyper focus on it, I do everything in my power to be the best at it. And I will continue that for a while. One example is violin. I started violin in kindergarten and I didn't stop doing it until I was in 9th grade.
I didn't know you played violin. That's great.
Yeah, I went like years where I was just like exceptionally excited about it and I wanted to do it, and I would practice every day and I would do it constantly and I would get to be really good. And by the time I was in 9th grade, I was like, I know it. I've done it. I'm done. But I had also realized a new hyperfixation at that time. Once I hit 9th grade, I started ROTC, and it was something that was really exciting for me and I wanted to be the best at it. So I started spending all of my time doing that, which is where the other hyperfixation fell off. Mine are just more long-term, I think. I did ROTC for 4 years and I was extremely into it and passionate about it, and I didn't do anything else. In fact, I couldn't do anything else. I wouldn't give myself time to. So if it was like just one thing, and I would stick with it for a long period of time.
Okay, I was just curious. Like I said before, there are certain things that I absolutely love about these non-neurotypical ADHD personalities. I didn't like it about myself, to be very 100% honest with you, but I love it in watching it in my kids, right? And I wouldn't want to change who they are in the least little bit. But is there something about your ADHD that you like? Or if it is, like, what is one thing that you love about it?
I've noticed in having ADHD that I'm more empathetic to other people. And I like that. I like that I can see other people in other situations and I can kind of put myself in their shoes and be there for them. And just noticing things around myself more than other people would. I think that that's a really good thing about ADHD. Even though there's so many frustrating things about it, it is nice to be able to connect to people in that way. Especially with not being able to connect to people usually, like without feeling awkward or distant in some way. There's that, and then there's also multitasking, and I find it very useful for the same reasons a lot of people do for work and for school. It just helps you get things done. Maybe not completely, but being able to feel like you're doing a lot, even if it's not really, it's nice. Yeah, that's about it.
I find it interesting, and this is just general curiosity question, and just I've had different experience. Oh, stupid email. Give me a second. Okay. Like, if there weren't, I don't know, let's pretend, right? We're in an ADHD-based school, okay? So you can have bicycle pedals under your desk, or if you need to walk around, or if you need, like, whatever. I guess what I run into so many times, like with people who are critical of their own ADHD, myself included, and then watching the kids, is like, there's so many things I don't like about it. I don't like about it. I don't like about it. Like, would you change your brain if you could like have a total brain transplant where you had your same kind of likes and interests and talents, but with someone who didn't have the same distractibility or the same emotional intensity, like would you trade brains with someone if you could, or are you kind of okay with the brain you got despite its challenges?
I don't think that I would, but that would be because I'd be afraid of just not being myself. I don't think there'd be like the same personality and the same like I think I just would be a different person at that point. I don't think I'd want to do that, no.
Okay, good. Because I wouldn't either. We would say that all the time. And we like weird. Like weird is good. Weird is normal's boring. So we kind of deal well with it.
Yeah.
That's probably why you fit in with us so well. So all right. Well, anything else like you want to say, good, bad, ugly, otherwise, before we get off?
No, I think that's good.
Now Lucas has been quiet for over 30 minutes. Is he asleep?
No, he's playing on his phone.
Okay. That dude has the ability to go to sleep better. That's one thing I would trade with Lucas. Like I wouldn't necessarily trade out my whole brain, but his ability to go to sleep is a superpower to me. Like, oh my God.
It's there's too much going on up here like all the time for me to just go to sleep. I don't know how he does it.
I don't know either, because actually I'm more likely to nap during the day when there's 100 things going around than just sleep at night when it's quiet. Because when it's quiet, that's when my brain goes, oh, now it's my turn. So like it's all.
No, it's like, oh, you forgot to do this and you've got to do that. And did you remember to put this away? It's like a lot.
You'll forget though, when I'm going to sleep, it's not usually at like normal times.
I know.
Like at 2 a.m, I'll stay up forever, but it's the 4 p.m. that I get tired.
That's why when I used to take you to the movies, you'd fall asleep in 10 minutes in the car.
Yeah, it's because I don't sleep when I'm supposed to.
Well, there's no supposed to, so you quit that.
You know what I mean, though.
Yeah, I just sleep for very long periods of time, very heavily.
It was so funny. Summer, when you first got in the house, and like you slept so much. And I was like, at first I thought like maybe she's sick. Like, is she not feeling well or whatever? And I love my father. And he 80s ADHD versus 90s versus 2021 is a whole different like species of animal, right? But he's recognizing and learning things. And he was the first one who said, Kayla, leave her alone. She's safe. I was like, holy shit. Yay. Thank you, Summer, for being safe at my house. Like, I don't know. It was just kind of a cool feeling. So it was really fun.
Yeah, I like to sleep. I used to do the same thing at my sister's house. In fact, there are only a few places that I can just like knock out. But at my sister's house, every time I'd go there, I'd just like fall asleep. I don't know if it's like the smells or like the people or like the comfort. I don't know what it is, but it just like puts me to sleep.
But I mean, like when all your needs are actually met, right? You got a roof and you got a blanket and you got some. How's the kitty cat?
Yeah. How's what?
How's your kitty cat?
Oh, she's good. She's out in the living room. I was playing with her whenever Lucas was on his interview.
I got not manipulated. I got asked to and said yes to bottle feeding Jenna's kittens. Lucas, I told you this?
Are they as vicious as the kittens we used to bottle feed?
No, these are nicer because Jenna had she had a cat that kind of broke into her bedroom through her window unit and had kittens under her bed. Then she went to go spend the night at Brittany's house in New Iberia, came back, the mama cat was dead. But these kittens are already like 3 weeks old. And I wasn't going to let a 17-year-old try to bottle feed cat. So anyways, I've got him for about 10 days.